it's still early on, so I want to knock on wood when I say this, but how impressed have you been with the way that, obviously all these different rules and all these different systems were set in place, if you will, to make sure that these student athletes are taken care of. They're going to stay healthy. They're going to do all they can, at least, to keep them as healthy as possible. But I feel like the SEC has crushed it. I mean, again, knock on wood. There really haven't been hardly any cases, if any at all. Just talk about your thoughts on what the SEC's been doing, and I guess really how happy and relieved you are, because, I mean, we're all sitting here with our fingers crossed that, everything's going to go smoothly. We're going to get to September 26th. We're going to have kickoff, and we're going to be all good. I mean, how impressed, I guess, have you been, and how relieved have you been that everything has gone up to plan up to this point at least?
I mean, really impressed. And I'm somebody that's been kind of critical of Greg Sankey for stuff that's petty, like the way he did the schedule reveal and not the full schedule reveal, but when they came out with the 2 added teams and that news dump on a Friday afternoon,
I was ridiculous.
I was not thrilled with that. Right. And at the time, I remember kind of going in on him about how the Pac-12 has a schedule already. The Big Ten, the Big Ten already has a schedule out. I think the ACC had already come out with theirs. And it kind of felt like the SEC was lagging behind, and just me being a typical member of the media and overreacting to something before I had, let it marinate. And I can admit that that's exactly what happened in this case. Greg Sankey's done a phenomenal job. And it's easy to say that, I think, as a fan or somebody that covers this league now, especially because you have something to compare it to with what we've seen with the Big Ten and the Pac-12 especially. But, this is something I kept saying to you, but like while it was happening, the Big Ten really thought that they were going to, in the same way, because I think not a lot of people know this, but all 5 of the Power 5 conferences were working together in the offseason to have like a universal scheduling system to where they had like the same amount of games and it was kind of fair and all that kind of stuff. And the Big Ten went rogue and announced they're going to do conference-only schedule. And I think it kind of gave them this false bravado, and they thought that we're going to do something and everyone else is going to follow. They're going to follow our lead for whatever reason. And they did the same thing with canceling the season. And it's been such a horrible look for the conference. And not just because people want to see football. I obviously get like the safety part of it, and there's, kids' health and all that kind of stuff. And all that's really important. But when you see what Kevin Warren does, there's no communication, and he decides to cancel the season like on the heels of a week before having this big reveal of their schedule, and then canceling the season. And of course, their lapdogs, the Pac-12 does the same exact thing. And then you come to find out later in the week, they used whatever report they used was completely inaccurate. And it's just like, it's a horrible, and like, it's the worst possible like scenario that played out. And then you look at Greg Sankey just sitting back here, like, and they asked him, like, how did you avoid this? And he said, everything we've learned about COVID is a wait and see approach. We learn more and more every day about it. Why would you not just wait to see what happens?
Well, especially when kickoff's not, so it's so far out, you still have time. And yeah, I definitely think taking the wait and see approach is a lot better. Let things unfold, let them evolve. What I've thought's been so crazy with the Big Ten, because I agree with you, they look terrible. I mean, they're having students on campus and they're having intramural sports. They can't have college football. It makes absolutely no sense. Again, safety's first and everything, but I agree with you. I think the SEC has done a phenomenal job. We saw NC State, they pushed their opener back. I mean, I feel like these conferences, ACC, SEC, and Big 12, listen, none of them have thought, and I thought Scott Frost said it best. I thought he had some of the best perspective on the entire pandemic. He said, listen, if our goal is to have 0 student athletes get COVID, we're going to fail at that whether we play or we don't. So, I mean, the student athletes, I know everybody loves to make the argument, oh, they should be paid. Oh, my God, they're getting exploited. And listen, there's an argument they should be paid. I'm not saying that. But can you also acknowledge they are treated like kings? I mean, the way they're taken care of versus the normal student with the facilities they're in, the people watching over them, the medical staffs that are at their availability, you're doing them a disservice taking them away from that necessarily. And I think, I don't know, maybe you can enlighten me on this. I know for a while the Big Ten was still practicing, but they're not going to play?
So that went on for I think a couple of days at most, right. Because I think there's still a general feeling that they're going to reverse this decision. They're going to change
their minds, right.
Yeah, and again, when you really unwrap everything that's happening with the Big Ten, when you find out that they talk about doing the spring football season, and at the core of this whole argument of, well, it's player safety. And what really pissed me off, and I get fired up easily, especially with the Big Ten, because I've always thought that conference was a joke. I've always called it the Big Three since I was like 8 years old. It's Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State.
Right.
It's nothing else. I get that Wisconsin and Minnesota like dip their big toe in like the deep end of like the big boy pool every now and then,
right.
but it's never anything that's like substantial. So when you hear that they're going to have this whole thing because of player safety, and they did take this very arrogant, like looking down their nose at the SEC of, well, we
right.
care about, our players and our student athletes. And then you hear like the media that's associated with the Big Ten saying like I think, I can't remember her name, and I love her to death. She's a great follow on Twitter, but she posted Elika Siddiqui. She used to be with Fox, and she posted something about how she would trust the doctors, and medical experts from the Big Ten, Stanford and, Michigan, all this other stuff. And again, we find out that those numbers weren't real. And on top of that, you talk about player safety, and you're going to have 2 seasons in a 10-month span. And then you're telling me that, like, it blows my mind. And the argument you brought up is a great one about, for forever, we've talked about how college athletes and football players specifically, if you go to a school, like, especially if it's like it's a big football school, they always get preferential treatment, And then all of a sudden, this time that's just thrown out the window. And I've never understood that. I've never understood why that's been the case. It makes no sense, really. And I think it boils down to basically the universities. If you're going to open campus for regular students, you're opening yourself up for a lot of potential issues. And they did that because they wanted to collect tuition checks. Yeah, and as soon as that's done, they're going to send these kids home and make them, do online virtual classes and all that kind of shit, because they don't care about, like, it's the same thing with the NCAA. I don't want to get on a high horse about this or a soapbox, but
right.
None of these people that are in power really, truly, in my opinion, care about the student athlete. Like Kevin Warren, his son.
It's a business. It's a business. At the end of the day. It's a business,
right? And so, but don't tell me that you had the best interest in mind for these student athletes when you talk about this. Like, we're gonna have a spring season, and you get all the 12 or all the 14 ADs from the Big Ten on a conference call, and it's the first time that conversation's even been had from any level. Like, that makes absolutely no sense that level of communication is so bad. Then you want to like sit here and hide behind this facade of, well, we care about our student athletes. No, you don't. You care about the bottom line. You care about, like, the almighty dollar. And as soon as those kids, like, as soon as they get those tuition checks, they can't get reimbursed, they are going to send everyone home, guaranteed.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I've talked about that a bunch too. It's just, unfortunately, I mean, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, I guess. Yeah. But yeah, you're looked at as a number. I mean, like you said, I think these schools, they realized, hey, we know the risks, but we need to justify charging full tuition. So if we can bring them back, show face, hey, we tried. Oh, well.
This is your fault.
Right, exactly. Right. Those checks of cash, too bad. So you're going to take what you can get for sure.